You have a very good memory. It's been 2 weeks since we did that. All that's true, and reason I mention that in this context is because that's going to change. He's already changed. He didn't feel at all bad about pranking him the first time. The second time, he feels bad about it, but he doesn't do anything about it. And there's going to be a third time coming up in the reading. I don't think you're there yet. It's right before you get to chapter 17, so I think it's chapter 16. There's going to be another opportunity for him to prank him. And you see through these pranks and other things that he begins to feel different about Jim. And as we read the whole book, even after chapter 18, there are going to be other opportunities for him to answer that question or to deal with that issue about how does he feel about Jim. Is there anything else he grows in? Can you think of any other area of his life? He's pretty one-dimensional. He's just 14 years old. He doesn't have a lot going on. I should point out that he never changes his view of slavery. He's static in that respect. I don't know if we'll get to that, but you can still use it if you have. He never changes his view. He changes his view toward Jim, who is one slave, but he doesn't change his view toward slavery in general. What's that?
What is his view on
That it's the law, and that if you're an abolitionist, if you're somebody who tries to set a slave free, then you're breaking the law, which you literally are. But he just says it's the law, and so he's a conformist in that sense. Whatever the law is, by the way, if we make things immoral, and make them legal, just because they're legal doesn't make them moral. If we make immoral things legal, then basically society is saying it's okay, and many people will look at it that way. If it's not illegal, I can do anything I want to. Anyway, to me, that's part of the problem with slavery. It was legal. Well, it's got to be okay if somebody made it legal. All right, so those are a few things about, and we'll talk more about that on Thursday. Look at number 10, realism and romanticism in the adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I'm going to tell you a couple of things here that you haven't gotten to yet, but I want to plant the seed for them. Do you remember what realism is? You know, a definition of realism? Delaney, do you remember? How about it, Isabella?
Is it like it presents things as they are?
Yes. Another word to say, as they the actuality of things, but I like what you said, as they are. Not like, well, what would be romanticism?
like out of the ordinary?
Yeah, and to take what you just said, and romanticism looks at things as you wish they were. Realism looks at things as they really are. And extraordinary. So anything else about, that's one thing about realism. Realism also takes place in the moment. Like it's about today, it's not about yesterday, it's not about the past. Realistic stories don't take place in the past, they always take place in the present. And they are actuality, and they're usually normal people. Like they're not kings and queens or fairies and fairy princesses and things like that. Those would be more romantic. Realism is always about regular people doing regular things, real things, and things in the moment, not the past. Right? Can you remember, Sarah, anything about romanticism? We got one. It's Laura said unusual things, extraordinary things. That would be romantic.
Wasn't it like something? Wasn't it like focus on like the nature and like?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about nature? What was their focus about nature? What was their view of nature?
Wasn't it like the beauty of nature? Like.
Yeah, and the emotions, it's also, romantic stories are very emotional, that appeal to the emotions. And romanticism is also, it focuses on nature and it idealizes nature. It makes nature into something almost like a god, like Wordsworth almost made it into a god. Notice I asked that question, you can't take it out of Frankenstein. You need to be able to tell me why Frankenstein is romantic. So realism and romanticism, the past, extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, nature, emotions, the exotic, the strange. That's why Frankenstein is a romantic novel, because it's weird, supernatural. Remember, they also were concerned, and that's up there in number 2 and number 3. You need to really know what romanticism is. There are 9 qualities. You need to study those. There's various ways I could ask you those. And so realism and romanticism in Huck Finn. So let's look at examples. Particularly with Tom Sawyer, he was the romantic, and Huck Finn was the realist. All right? Isabella, do you remember how Huck was a realist? Like we told you, we talked about early in the book. He approached things as a practical person. That would be another aspect of realism.
Like in the way he lied, I guess.
The way he lied? How so?
Because he was like the other person. Was it Tom Sawyer?
Yeah.
Who like lied just to like practical things. But he lies whenever it's like necessary.
So he's very practical about it. There's a practical reason for his lying. He didn't want to get hurt. He didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want to, something bad to happen. So he's very practical. Do you remember any other practical things he does? Like when he was told about prayer, what did he do?
He prayed for fish hooks.
So he tried it. And in his opinion, it didn't work. So he abandoned it. When he was told about the magic lamp, what did he do? That's Aladdin and the magic lamp. What did he do?
Tried to see if it would work.
He found a lamp and he tried to see if it worked. So how would you describe Huck's approach to things? He doesn't dismiss them.
He'll try it, but if it doesn't do what he wants, then he'll just immediately forget about it.
That's what makes him a realist. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to do it. So with prayer and with magic lamps, when he was told about Moses, he was real interested in Moses until what? He became uninterested in Moses when he found out what about Moses? He was dead. He says he didn't put no stock in dead people. What would a romantic do? Romanticism loves the past. A realist, I just said, remember, a realist is always focused on the present. And Huck, if he's dead, he's no use to me. So he dismisses. That's another way that he's practical and romantic and not romantic. Those are just 3 ways. When Huck escaped the cabin, what did he do that on the surface appeared to be romantic, but really had a practical reason? What did he do? He faked his death. He lied. But he put in a lot of touches. He put in a lot of imagination into it, which is a romantic thing, but what was his purpose for making it look like he died?
To get away from his father.
He didn't want them chasing him. If they thought he was dead, why would they chase him? And Huck, on the other hand, when he used his imagination, what was he using it for? Like the games they played about being a gang and attacking the Sunday school class. What was his purpose for using his imagination? Like, why did he do that? Why did they play those games? Was there any practical purpose for it? It was for fun. So his purpose for using his imagination was simply entertainment. Huck's reason for using his imagination was survival. There's more to come, and you'll see that, in your reading, but you need to be able to remember those two things. Definitely for this exam, study the 9 characteristics of realism or romanticism. I think there were 7 that I gave you of realism. Make sure you know those. And finally, violence. Delaney, can you think of some violent? Before you tell me, Sarah had a question.
What were the romantics of like, we went over the realism, but like, what was the romantics?
There are 9 of them.
But like in Huck Finn, was there like any specific?
Yeah, we said, first of all, imagination. But remember, Huck has an imagination too, but he uses it for practical reasons. So the focus is on the imagination, which according to Mark Twain, the way Tom uses it rather is not practical. So one is imagination, that's romantic. Are we looking at realism or imagination or romanticism or both?
Well, we talked, you went into detail about like the realism in Huck Finn, but we never went into detail about the romanticism.
Okay, so Tom Sawyer being a romantic, he uses his imagination. That's one thing they believe in, the focus on the imagination. The focus on the past, which is, remember, Tom would read those books about the past, and that would be a third thing. The idea that, well, no, we won't add that. But the second thing was the past and emphasis on that. The fourth thing would be the sentimentality, and that's number 8. I should have asked you to highlight that too. But number 8 is sentimentality. That's another aspect. That's the emotions. And sentimentality are emotions that are out of control. Like if you're too sentimental, you're not using your mind. And so that's the judge. When Judge tried to reform Pap, he was swayed by his emotions. He was easily fooled because Pap manipulated him. And so people that are sentimental or romantic are easily manipulated. Those are just a few. You could add nature to that, but again, Huck is a realist when it comes to nature. He loves the beauty of nature. My question back to Delaney is, what about violence? Can you think of some violence? Again, you've only read 12 chapters.
His dad, basically kidnapped him.
Yes, and abused him. Yeah, very good.
And then didn't Huck kill something to make it look like?
Yes, but it was pretend violence, but it was still violence. Can you think of any?
Probably just when the snake.
Yes. Yeah, playing that trick on Jim was kind of a violent. I mean, could have killed him. The venom could have killed him. There was a dead man on the ship, well, on the house, the floating house. There was a dead man. Violence. The group was coming out to find Jim, who was on Jackson's Island. They were going to that was a violent thing, a mob, a gang, going looking for someone. They probably would have hurt him. Any other examples of violence? You're going to see a lot more on Thursday. Yeah.
Like in the beginning of the book, when Huck's like with his friends and they're talking about like the kid who would like cry to his parents if you like told they would like kill him or something. I mean, they weren't serious, but like would that be violent?
Yes, it would be. Yeah, they imitate violence. They live in a violent world, so even the games are violent. And when I grew up, we played war. We played, well, nobody does this anymore, but Indians and cowboys. That was thing, boy, you know, lots of movies about that. I mean, all those things are very violent. That's all Tom is doing. He's just playing the games. He's just playing the books that he read. So that was, you're in for one of the most violent scenes in the entire book is you're gonna read for Thursday. So I think you'll have enough for that. So can you think of any other kind of, slavery is violent, just the idea of kidnapping people and holding them hostage, holding them, as prisoners, making them work for you. That's the whole idea of slavery is violent. Can you think of anything else? Well, we will go back. We have a few minutes, but we'll go back to sentimentality. Let's do that now. We got a minute. Do you remember what sentimentality is? Number 8. So 8, 9, 10, and 14. Do you remember what sentimentality is? Well, just to make this quicker, sentimentality are extreme emotions, and I'd add artificial emotions. The best way I have to define it or illustrate it is if you go to a funeral of somebody that you love, you're going to cry. But if you watch a movie about somebody that dies and you cry, you could argue that's sentimentality, because nobody died. It's just it's make-believe, and yet it causes you to cry. That could be considered sentimentality. What's the problem with sentimentality? I'm kind of a nostalgic person. Christmas is a nostalgia. I don't express it by crying, but I do get nostalgic. What's the problem with being nostalgic or sentimental? That if you're easily caught, if you cry easily, if people can make you easily cry, what's the problem with that? I know my wife is also a girl, and so I know what it's like. I know you express emotions differently than guys do. I've heard that a million times in the past 47 years. I respect it, though. But even you can overdo it. So what's wrong with sentimentality? What's wrong with being the kind of person that can cry unless you're doing it to try to manipulate people? You're the one that's trying to manipulate this person, because when you go, don't cry, okay, I'll give it to you, that kind of thing. Well, what's the problem with being too emotional? Or was it a problem for you, not for the one that's emotional, not the other person? Why could that ever be a problem? You ever thought of that?
Make you be too sensitive.
And why is that a problem? People
Don't really want to say anything or talk to you.
So they're going to manipulate you. If you're crying, if you're too emotional, you're not thinking, and that's the way Mark Twain looks at it. So we'll look at that tomorrow. On Thursday. We won't do this tomorrow. Would it be helpful, because sometimes we've done it and you didn't get anything done, would it be helpful to work together? Ideally, that's a good idea, but practically it may not work out. Let me know tomorrow. Yes.
Tomorrow, can you talk about the treatment of nature and romantic poetry?
Yeah, there's several things with romanticism we probably need to do, but bring this stuff with you, and tomorrow you'll get some time to work together. Did you have a good break, Sierra?
It was alright.
Did you see your brothers?
Yeah, I did.